Hello. So I don't know why every time I start a video now, I'm just like, why did I start it like that? And all I did was say hello. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Anyway, hi. Today I'm going to be sharing with you all the books I read in the month of April because it is now May, which is crazy. May means that I'm in the last final season of my entire life. So wish me luck because I'm suffering. But anyway, let's just get into the books that I read last month. The first book that I read in the month of April is There Are No Saints by Sophie Lark. This is a dark romance book. I read this for a video, which I don't know if it's out by now, but it should be, I think. So I'm not gonna share with you my thoughts on these first two books. I'm just gonna kind of summarize them. So There Are No Saints follows, oh God, I don't even want to think about these books anymore. These books were awful. Spoiler alert. This book takes place in San Francisco and it follows like this big artist. He's a sculptor. He's really popular, very rich. And it follows this poor artist who's suffering like I am. She's suffering in a different way than I am, okay? Basically, this big shot artist named Cole has this enemy. One day the enemy thinks he sees Cole looking at Mara, who's the struggling artist, and so he basically almost kills. Oh, Cole kills people, by the way. So this enemy almost kills Mara and leaves her at the place where Cole tends to bury his victims, and then Cole sees Mara there half dead and decides not to save her and just walks away, but Mara ends up escaping and getting to safety even though no one believes her when she says what happened to her. And then from there, Cole actually does take an interest in Mara because she survived and he starts stalking her. This is an awful book. That's all I'm going to say about it, and I shouldn't even be saying that much. So then after that, I picked up an even worse book somehow, and that is Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. This book follows a girl who's getting stalked, and then she falls in love with her stalker. And there's a lot of unconsensual sex. So watch that dark romance video if you want to find out more, because there are interesting books to say the least. Then after that, I decided to go with something that's actually good writing and actually a decent story, and that is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshni Chokshi. This book essentially follows this woman whose name I can't remember. What's her name? Indigo. This book follows a woman named Indigo. In the beginning of the book, she meets her soon-to-be husband. So you're actually following it from her perspective. You're following it from the perspective of her husband. At the beginning of her marriage, she basically says, I have a lot of secrets from my past. We'll be fine as long as you don't ever try to, inquire into that. And he agrees. And then something happens with her family home and they need to go back, and he starts to inquire about her past because men can't listen. So it follows the perspective of her husband and her old best friend. And it tells the story of her childhood, and it's just a really good book, honestly. I gave this book 4 stars. I thought it had really beautiful writing. I mean, Roshni Chokshi is known for her beautiful lyrical writing, and this book is no exception. It was also just a beautiful story, a beautiful atmosphere. If I had to describe this book in one word, it would be beautiful, if you can't tell. Other than that, I don't have many thoughts about it. I don't want to give too many of my thoughts because I think they might be a little bit of a spoiler. So I will say I would recommend this book. I think it was definitely worth your time. After that, I picked up Wilder Girls by Rory Power. This book is YA, which I did not know when I bought it, but I bought it on Book Outlet for $2, so I can't really complain. It essentially takes place on this island where there's this girls' school, and a couple years back, the girls on the school started exhibiting this disease, and it takes many different forms, but it's kind of like body horror. One girl has a claw, another girl, I can't even remember anymore. But basically it turns their bodies weird and foreign. So at the beginning of this book, they've been living under this quarantine for quite a while. A lot of the girls have already died off. A lot of the headmistresses and stuff aren't left anymore. And you're following this girl named Hetty, and her best friend Byatt goes missing, and she's determined to do whatever it takes to find her. So that's kind of where the story takes off from. I thought this book was fun for the most part. I really liked the body horror elements. I think that was a nice twist, and I wasn't really expecting it. I was just expecting this book to be about the weird disease. So for the disease to take on kind of a horror element was interesting. And the book kind of had a horror element as well. And overall, I think the premise was interesting, the fact that they're locked on this island, and the island itself has been affected by the disease. The animals on the island are violent and nasty and grotesque, and they have to stay on the school campus because it's surrounded by a fence. So I think the premise was interesting, and the fact that the government knows about it and is sending them some supplies, but just not enough for the girls to live off of. But I do think at the end of the day, it seems like the author didn't really know what to do with this book. The ending in particular was really lackluster and disappointing. It might have been different if there was supposed to be a book 2, but this book was released in 2019 and there's no news of a book 2. So it's been 5 years. So I can pretty much say that that is not going to happen. But yeah, I just feel like she didn't know how to end it, which made the ending just very disappointing to read. I did enjoy it overall though, so I gave it 3 stars. Then I picked up The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. This is the second book in the Poppy War series. And unfortunately, I can't really summarize this book for you because it's the second book in a series, but I also can't really summarize the first book for you because I read the first book maybe 5 years ago, maybe longer. I read the first book immediately when it came out, and I have forgotten everything that happened in it. And I thought that when reading the second book, like, I would remember, and I remember, like, very small things, but most of them are spoilers, so I can't summarize that for you. So what I can say is that this series is inspired by, like, the Opium Wars in China. So it's, like, a Chinese-inspired fantasy, and the main character has, like, powers, which is typical fantasy stuff. I'm doing a bad job, but that's all I can do right now. What I can say is about this book in particular, I gave this book 4.5 stars. I just absolutely loved it. Again, I went in remembering nothing about the first book, so I'm really surprised that I liked this book. I even tried to go on one of those websites that has like summaries of books. I tried to read it for the Poppy War, and none of it stuck in my head. So the fact that I still ended up loving this is saying a lot, I think. Like, since I had no basis for the first book. I just don't think R.F. Kuang can do anything wrong. Like, she's so talented, and I love her books. They're always so unique. I mean, Yellowface is not her best work. I still liked it, but it's just not her best work. But her fantasy is where she really shines. And I just can't even express how great it is to read fantasy from a leftist perspective. I feel like you can get that a lot in nonfiction. You can get it a little bit in like literary fiction, but from fantasy, it's a perspective that's sorely missing. It's just so refreshing to read from someone who has a similar like political basis as me. And I was just so glad that I had the third book already, because after I finished reading this, like, I needed to pick up the third one immediately. And that leads to the next book that I read, which was The Burning God by R.F. Kuang, book 3 in the series. I also gave this book 4.5 stars. I don't really have much else to say about this book in particular. When I read a series, especially like right in a row like this, my thoughts on the series is kind of based off of it as like a whole rather than the individual books, unless one book like really stands out for being really bad or something. Literally, my Goodreads review for this just says 4.5 stars. God damn. And that's how I feel. I think this was a really satisfying ending to the trilogy. I think that it just ended on a perfect note and everything wrapped up really well. I love this series, and I just want R.F. Kuang. Like, I know she's out there at Yale. I know she's doing big brained shit, but I really just want her to spend all of her time writing 24/7 so that I personally can get more out of her. Because I just want her to write more fantasy. That's all I want. I want it so bad. This was a great series, and I really, really recommend it. I think it's one of my favorite of all time, even though I can't remember the first book. Like, that's crazy. That's insane. The next book I picked up is The School for Good Mothers by Jessamine Chan. This book, it's kind of self-explanatory. It takes place in this dystopian world, and it follows this mother, Frida, and in the beginning of the book, she's just struggling. She has this really bad day where she needs to pick up something from work, and she decides to just leave her toddler at home. And her toddler is at home for a few hours, and when she comes back, her toddler is gone, and she has a message from the police telling her that her toddler is at the station. She freaks out, she rushes over there, and she's essentially lost custody of her child because she left her child at home. And there is this program that she can go to for a year where she can learn how to be a good mother. And if she passes it, then she can regain partial custody of her child because she is divorced. So her husband and her husband's new wife has half custody. So her child isn't going into the system or anything, but she does lose custody of her. So she goes to this school, and it's just batshit insane. At the school, there are like these hyper-realistic dolls that the mothers like take control of and name and have to pretend like they're their daughters or sons, depending on what kind of a child you have in the real world. And it's just creepy and weird. and I liked it. I gave this book 3 stars. I really liked the premise. I think it was like very interesting and thought-provoking, especially like I liked how the author didn't shy away from like the racial dynamics of this. In the School for Good Mothers, there were primarily like black and brown mothers. A lot of the mothers were there for like petty reasons, but some of them were there because they actually like did bad shit to their kids, which I also liked that there was like that difference there. But I do agree with a lot of the other reviews on Goodreads that this book was very slow and repetitive. Once you got to the school, it was really interesting in the beginning, but then it was just like lesson after lesson after lesson after lesson. It's like I kind of get the swing of things by now. I don't think I need to be shown every single lesson. I wish more different stuff could be happening. I also think that a lot of the themes could have been explored deeper, and that the plot could have been a bit more complex and interesting, like again with I said with the repetitive stuff. And then in terms of the themes that could have been explored deeper, I think it's really interesting that this book talks about the experience of Frida's parents being immigrants and how that affected her childhood. And I kind of wish I had gone into her relationship with her parents a bit more, because I think that would have been really interesting to read about. But overall, I did like this book, and again, I gave it 3 stars. Then I picked up The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. How to describe this book? It follows this woman who is stuck in this publishing job that she kind of hates. She's been trying to write, but she hasn't really been able to write since she split with her best friend a while ago, after like something happened between them. But you don't really know what happened between them in the beginning of the book. But both of them have always loved this one writer who's very like elusive and mysterious. This writer is hosting this like very famous writing retreat at her mansion estate, and through a couple strings that get pulled, they end up both of them being able to go on the writing retreat. So she's stuck on this writing retreat with her ex-best friend, and things are very tense between them. And things kind of pick up from there. I don't want to go much further into it because I think it could be spoiler territory, but things get spooky and things get mysterious and things get thrilling. And that's all I'll say. That's all I will say. If I can say anything, because I can't really speak right now. And this book has very mixed reviews, but I have to say I really enjoyed it. It could just be that I haven't read many thrillers. This is like probably the 3rd thriller I've ever read in my entire life. So if a lot of people didn't like this thriller based off of like common tropes or something, that wouldn't affect me, because I'm not sick of those tropes yet, because I haven't read enough thrillers to be sick of them. I just honestly could not put it down. I was constantly reading this until I finished it. But that said, it wasn't perfect. At the writing retreat, every writer that goes there has to write their own book over the space of the retreat, and because of that, there's like a book within a book, which I just felt like was unnecessary and kind of boring to read about. Like I kind of ended up skimming those chapters. There are also some sex scenes in here which are very weird and very unnecessary, but overall I did have a lot of fun with it, and I would recommend it. I give it 4 stars. After that, I picked up The Guest by Emma Cline. This book follows a young 22-year-old woman who is in a relationship with this very rich man. She's from the city, and her roommates have gotten sick of her like not paying rent and have actually like kind of evicted her from the house. But the very rich man that she's with does not know this, and she's been staying with him at like his summer estate on the beach. And he just invited her to stay for the summer, so he has no idea that she doesn't have a home to go back to. And then they get into like a little tiff, and he tells her that she should go back home to the city. But instead of doing that, she decides to stay at the beach and wait like a week and then go see him at his party, because she thinks that then he'll just have to forgive her and everything will be put behind them. And at the same time, during all of this, there's someone that she owes a lot of money who's very violent and keeps messaging her. So she's basically just like coasting along on this beach, like finding random people to stay with as a guest, hence the name, during that time. And like, I think I get what the author was trying to do with this. Like, it's a very slow build of tension up to that very last scene. But at the end of the day, I just didn't really jive with it. I haven't used that word in so long. Jive? Like, who am I? Am I a jester? I just thought that this book was boring, though. Other reviewers have talked about the fact that the author was just so good at raising the stakes, like raising those tension over time. But for me, it just felt like I kept waiting for something to happen and something to happen and something to happen. And then, like, towards the end, when it seemed like something was going to happen, it just cut off. And that was the end of the book. And then I also feel like the main character wasn't really fleshed out. She doesn't really seem to have a personality other than being a mess. And while I can relate to into that. It's just not what I want to read about. And again, like, I guess that was not on purpose, but I really would have wanted her to have more substance personally. So I ended up giving this book 2.5 stars, which is so disappointing because I thought I was going to love it. I even bought a signed copy. So at some point when I do an unhaul, this will be up for grab on Pango Books if you want it. I just wasn't very happy with it. The next book I read is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. This book is a hard one to describe. It follows the Daughter of the Moon Goddess. And at the beginning of how do I describe this? So this girl has been like living on the moon her whole life with her mother and their one like servant and no one else. And then one day this girl uses her magical powers when her mother has always told her not to, and it alerts like the celestial kingdom's government that someone else is on the moon with the mother. So they come to the moon and they're like, we know you have someone else here. And the mom is like, no, I don't. That's a lie. And then they leave for some reason instead of actually checking it out. And then the servant is sent to take the daughter back down to Earth to be safe for a while, I guess. But then something happens and the daughter ends up landing in the celestial kingdom without the servant, and she's all on her own. And from there she finds work for this one like lord's daughter, I guess. And then one day she sees this man sitting by a pond and she just completely like unloads off into him. And then she finds out that he's actually the prince. And then the prince invites her to work in his palace. Well, not to work there. She asks him to be a part of this like tournament, and whoever wins the tournament gets to be in the I don't know is the thing. I don't get this book. I really did not get on with this book. The best thing I can say is that the world is really imaginative. Like, I loved the inspiration from Chinese folklore, and it's really interesting because like some people are immortal, but then there's also like the mortal kingdom, and then immortals can have these powers, and I don't know. I think the book's a little bit of a mess at the same time, to be honest. Like, I didn't understand how the world worked. I didn't really understand the relations between the immortals and mortals. I didn't completely understand the magic system. And none of that was ever really explained, or at least I didn't see it being explained. I could have missed it, but I don't think I did. I also didn't like the pacing. There were random like jumps in years, and then things were supposed to be like well established, and it just felt like you're missing out on like moments of character growth. Oh my god, I also hated that every single guy character fell in love with the main character. Like, that's the most ridiculous trope that there is. I didn't realize that this one was YA, so I probably would not have picked this up knowing that. But I did buy it, so I did make myself read it. And the writing was like all tell, very little show, so the writing wasn't great. And like, I went on Goodreads and the reviews of this one are all very high, and I don't really understand that. Like, I don't think it's just me. It just felt like, even though the inspiration was there with the Chinese folklore, I just felt like the execution was very lacking, and I will not be continuing on with this series. I gave this 2 stars. We're almost at the end. This is the second to last book, and it is Woman Eating by Claire Coda. This book follows a young mixed-race vampire who has always like lived with her mother, but her mother has kind of gone crazy. So she set her mother up in like a nursing home, even though her mother looks like she's like 40. And she's trying to live on her own for the first time, and things are rough for her. And for instance, like, her and her mother subsisted primarily on pig's blood, but where she's at in London, she can't find pig's blood anywhere, so she's starving. She tries to order like dried pig's blood online, it's just not doing it for her. She has this internship at an art gallery, and that's not really going as she thought it would, so things are just kind of sad for her. Basically, this is sad girl lit fic, but make it vampiric. I gave it 3.5 stars. I didn't like it as much as I wanted to, as much as I thought I would. Like, I really think the plot could have been more engaging. It felt like nothing was really going on for most of the book, and it's a very short book, so like, I feel like more should have happened. But at the same time, though, I feel like the author was very talented in making you feel for the main character. Like, I felt her isolation, and I even felt her hunger. Like, the author the author writes the main character as like watching a lot of mukbangs and stuff like that, and watching a lot of like what I eat in a day videos. So there's a lot of like lush descriptions of food, and as I was reading it, like, I was getting hungry myself, which is less I don't know. I thought that was really fun. I think it could have been better, but I did enjoy it. I think it was like a good literary twist on the classic vampire tale. Like it feels like a very unique for a vampire story. So again, I gave it 3.5 stars. And then the last book, and the book that I probably have the most thoughts on, honestly, is Doppelganger by Naomi Klein. This is kind of a hard book to describe. So essentially, Naomi Klein is this very famous leftist writer, and for years she's been getting mistaken on Twitter for Naomi Wolf, who is this right-wing grifter who used to be a feminist but then turned right-wing grifter. And so she wrote this book kind of about that, like as Naomi Wolf being her doppelganger, and through that she explores like America's right wing today and like how they've gotten there. And honestly, that's part of my issue with this book, is it just feels like it's all over the place. Like, okay, so this book is hard to review for me because I feel like I should give it a higher rating. And after reading some of the reviews on Goodreads, I definitely don't want to align myself with people giving it low ratings, because there's a lot of like fucking Zionists and like conspiracy theorists on Goodreads being like, this lady's crazy. So I don't want to align myself with them, but at the end of the day, like, I think it still could have been better. Like, I think this book covers a lot of interesting things. It talks about the war in Palestine. It talks about anti-vaxxers. It talks about people who think that vaccines cause autism. It talks about COVID and how, like, the left, like, how people who thought they were on the left can do a turnaround and end up like crazy right-wingers. But I just think I had a hard time with her saying that everything was connected to this, like, mirror land of doppelgangers. Like, I didn't really vibe with that thesis. I just felt like the book was kind of all over the place. Like, it was examining so many different things and that it didn't really feel cohesive to me, even though her attempt to make it cohesive was through like the Mirrorland and Doppelganger theme. I liked reading about Wolf. I liked reading about her connection to Wolf and her examination of Wolf, because I think Wolf is interesting. Like, she used to be this feminist writer, and then things took a turn for her, and now she's on like fucking Steve Bannon making money. And like, I did enjoy reading the book, even though it did feel kind of disjointed. But like, at the end of the day, I'm also just not sure that this book says anything new or revolutionary. I liked her points about coming together as a community and like focusing on structural changes. And I even really enjoyed how she talked about how like leftists are so quick to write off certain like right-wing beliefs when a lot of them stem from good places, like fear of big pharma, even though they then take that to a crazy place. But none of the information was really groundbreaking. Again, I think a lot of the originality of the book lays in the doppelganger premise, which again just didn't work for me. So overall, like, I did enjoy it. I think it's worth a read because it talks a lot about the current political climate in a very interesting way. I just think that it could have been more cohesive, and I just didn't seem to love it as much as everyone else did. So I gave this book 3 stars. Again, like, not a bad rating. I just thought I was going to be rating it higher. And there you go. Those are all the books that I read in the month of April. How many books is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That is 12 books, which is a pretty fucking good month, if I say so myself. I'm pretty proud of all the reading that I've done this month. And that is all. I will see you soon with another video. Goodbye.